Welcome to this episode of Biz for Biz Webections podcast. I am Ian Taylor, and in this episode, we are going to explore AI and what it means to you and your business and how it can be used. Here at Biz for Biz, we aim to help support and promote your business to achieve its ambitions and full potential. So today, I'm joined by Dr Katherine Bean, who is our resident expert amongst many of our other clients. Hi, Katherine. Good to have you with us today.
Good morning.
So, Katherine, just introduce yourself if you can and tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm Catherine and I work at Davana, where we help businesses using technology, AI, and other tools to improve their business. And that means improving their processes. It means making sure sales and marketing work together instead of working against each other, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
So I apply the tools of the trade to practical business situations.
great. Thanks, Katherine. I think an opening question then is, the title here is AI and how we can use it in the business. How would you define AI? And you talk about AGI. What do you mean?
Okay, so let's start kind of at the back, at
Mm,
the beginning. So AI is an umbrella term. It really covers three basic technologies. Expert systems, that's where, and I know you'll appreciate this, Ian, with the banking background. When you go into the bank and the computer says no, that was or is an expert system. Somebody has crafted a whole load of rules and processes, and the idea is that it greatly speeds up decision making. So, number one, expert systems. Number two, machine learning. This is where large amounts of statistical data are used to improve I'm going to say a model over time. And the obvious example of this will be big data. Pretty much everyone's heard of big data from the 2000s and the 2010. It was all the big thing. Everybody needed big data to make sure they were making the right decisions. Well, that big data was typically run through some kind of machine learning. And then third, which I think is the one we're really interested in today, is neural networks and deep neural networks, or deep networks as they're often called now, as a way of distinguishing them, I think, from years gone by. So a deep network is, actually, perhaps I should start again. A regular network is an input, set
yeah.
of inputs, set of outputs, and something in between, one or two layers of neurons in between. A deep network will maybe have hundreds or even thousands of layers between, hence the difference. And the neural network is intended to be, I'll say, an analogy to the way the human brain works. So
Okay.
we have neurons in our brain, we have neurons in our neural networks. The brain is connected with dendrites and synapses, whereas in the computer version, we just use numbers. But the outcome is broadly the same. Strictly speaking, it's a statistical model. I don't seem to be able to get my words out this morning.
No, it's early in the morning, so don't worry.
So yes, we use stats to encode the data. And the idea is that the more information in your model, the better the output. Okay, so I'm going to park that because I wouldn't be at all surprised if we don't touch on this again later.
Yeah.
AGI, or artificial general intelligence, that broadly speaking, and I'm going to say now, there's no definition. There's no definition for any of these things because nobody can agree on what consciousness is, what self-awareness is, and all these other things. And so the whole place is very murky. I
Mm.
think most people understand that a newborn baby isn't actually self-aware, right? It can't distinguish itself from its environment. It's all one thing. But nobody would say that the baby is not an intelligent creature, right?
Mm.
And so, because we have thousands of little corner cases like that, it becomes very difficult to define what artificial general intelligence will be. Having said that, I think we can probably say that it's intelligence at the level of the average person. So if it could do the things that the average person could do, then we probably have that box ticked. Exactly what that is and what it means, we don't really know.
It's a fascinating comparison, though. Carry on.
Well, if we can have artificial general intelligence, right? So an AI that is at the level of a human, then there are all kinds of possibilities that open up. Some of them good, some of them perhaps we would rather avoid.
Yeah, I think there's definitely cases out in the world where there's good and bad in terms of AI or AGI.
Well, one of the things we have to consider is employment.
Yeah.
If the AI is more than capable of doing everything that the humans can do, well, what's the point of the humans? How do they live? How do they earn money? How does all of that stuff that we take for granted, how does that work?
Well, that's always
And
been the yeah. That's
it
always
might
been the
be,
conundrum, though, isn't it, Catherine?
it
That
is.
they keep talking about these jobs of the future. What are they?
Good question. And it might be that the AI opens up a whole new way of doing things, and we enter what is essentially a utopia, where people don't have to toil for their daily existence. I don't know. But we will find out over the next few years which direction it goes. And there is the possibility that we've hit as far as we're going to go. This is as far as AI will go. It's not the first time that we've had what I will call a lot of hype and a lot of disappointment. This happened in the late 80s, early 90s, it happened in the 60s, and to a lesser extent in the 70s.
Hmm.
So it's not like this has been the first go round an optimistic approach that hasn't panned out.
Well, it's quite strange, isn't it? Because for the last, they've been talking about this being the next industrial revolution, and it seems to have been the next industrial revolution for the last however many years I can remember.
And that's because you have a jolly good memory.
Anyway, sorry, I'm interrupting you. So carry on, Catherine. Sorry.
No, I think that's probably all I need to say on AGI
Yeah.
without going into huge amounts of speculation, which I don't think is useful at this point.
No, that's fine. No, I think we want to be looking at how businesses can use this. And we've talked about tools in the past, tools available to business in AI and what they are. And perhaps you could sort of explore any areas and options available for business using these tools.
I can certainly give a stab at it. First of all, AI is a tool, right? Just like any. It's just like a word processor or a spreadsheet. It's a tool. So if you have a problem that this tool can work with, then fabulous. If you don't, find a different tool, right? It's as simple as that. Yes, there are some tools that this can do that others can't. And we're going to come on to that, I know, a bit later because you want to talk about stuff in a little more detail. So my thoughts here are if you haven't understood the problem, you can't come up with a solution. So step one, make sure you understand the problem, define it, put boundaries on it, and have it completely nailed down. Because until then, how do you look for a solution? If you don't understand the problem, you don't know what it is, you can't look for a solution. So step two is look for solutions to your well-defined problem and analyze them all. Don't just jump straight in and go, AI is the new cool thing. We're going to pick AI because there are downsides to picking AI. And I'm quite sure we're going to talk about that in a little bit later too. So look for solutions, look for a whole host of solutions. Don't pick the shiny new one, pick the easiest one. So that might mean using tools you already have, but using them in a new way. It might mean just changing processes. But explore all of the options, look at all of your solutions, and then finally pick the one that works the best. And by best, I mean best outcome, cheapest, least disruption. Because one of the things we don't want to do is put too much expense and too much destruction. No, not destruction. obstruction in
Obstruction.
place. Maybe that was one of those Freudian slips where you get it wrong, it really is destruction. So we want to make sure that we have the right tool in place that the employees know how to use, they're comfortable using, and they don't feel like this is just step one in getting rid of their job. Because when you get to that point, people go, no, I'm not interested. And now you're not getting a productivity boost, you're actually getting resistance, which is a productivity drain.
Yeah.
And we don't want that.
No, I don't know if we've passed the period of early adopters or just adopters. They're just we want obviously positive.
We're in we're in the area of early adopters,
Mm,
right? Everybody who is doing stuff now is, I'm going to say, dipping their toe in the water, seeing what it is.
mm.
Very few businesses are using it, I will say, all day, every day in anger,
Well, I think
ignoring what I said about the banks who've been using it for 30 years, etc., etc.
I just think as an individual, I'm a victim, not a victim. That's the wrong word. I'm being used by AI just by having my phone. So whilst I might be benefiting from it, I'm also probably there's things in there that I don't really need. It just that actually happens. But that's just from a personal standpoint, really, I suppose. But yeah, I think we all in as individuals, we all have a phone of sorts, and that is always that's acting on AI all the way through. And even when we search a holiday or something, we then get an email that says, "Have you forgotten about searching this holiday?" So there's a lot of stuff going on in the background. So let's talk about you've looked at your needs, you've looked at what you want to improve or improve your productivity. Have you got a practical example of a business that could focus on something at this moment in time?
Practical examples,
Like,
excellent.
communication, websites, all these sort of
It's
things.
all over the place.
Yeah,
So I'm going to pick your example of your mobile phone,
yeah.
right? And not your phone specifically, but phones in general.
Mm,
So lots of them, as you suggest, have AI being built into them. And I'm going to pick on Apple at the moment because they have been using AI on their phones and on their iPads and Macs and stuff for a few years.
mm,
But none of it looks like AI. They hide it behind things. So they go, well, if you've got a photograph, you can just copy and paste the phone number or the text out of the picture. You go, well, that's actually kind of handy because it's much easier for me to copy and paste a phone number than it is to look at the picture and type it in my phone,
mm.
right? I'm going to call it efficient, but it could be lazy. You could juggle the two either way.
Yeah.
So I've got this thing, and it's not really AI. I think of it as just making my life a little bit easier, copying and pasting a phone number or some text.
Mm,
But there's an AI in the background who's gone through, analyzed the picture, found all the text, made it editable, done all of that. Happened in the background as if by magic. I don't care. But what we're really talking about here is much more, I'm going to call it upfront and center AI,
mm,
right? So, yes, I do have some easy and obvious ones. The generative AI, which is really what we're talking about. So, creating images. I think most people at this point have either seen the images or typed into a prompt a cat wearing a spacesuit drinking a martini or something. It's just random bonkers things. And the AI goes, well, it's a bit avant-garde, but sure, here we go. And then it produces a picture of a cat wearing a spacesuit with a drink. And if you're lucky, it'll be the one you wanted. If you're unlucky, it'll be something completely different. But there will be a cat at some point, and a spacesuit, and a drink. And they're probably composed in such a way that it looks like the cat was enjoying the drink in its spacesuit. And you go, how easy was that to make? When you think about how hard it would be if I said to you, Ian, could you just sketch me out a cat wearing a spacesuit? You go, how do I do that?
yeah.
I have no idea how to even start it because, well, how do you put a cat in a spacesuit, right? You've never seen a picture of it.
It's all
And
good.
so we have pictures that are becoming more and more useful.
Mm,
Generative text, right? I think everybody's familiar with at least the words chat GPT.
yep.
But of course, there are a whole host of other companies also doing text generation, I'm going to call it. If you have a use for it, it's an immediate, obvious go-to. And the immediate, obvious go-to is I want to create written content. It might be helping me with an email. And lots of people pitch up to me at this point and go, Catherine, but how hard is it to write an email? Well, if you have to write an email in German, it probably isn't suddenly a trivial matter to you. But the AI can take your English or French or whatever it was and turn it into German. Or maybe your English isn't very good, right? Because maybe
Mm.
English is a second language, or you've just always struggled with it. You write your basic piece, run it through the AI, and now you're much smarter, or at least appear to be in your written word,
Yeah.
because your written word might not be along the same lines as your spoken word.
Right.
So suddenly you've got something, a tool that will polish up what you've done. Same applies. You want to make a blog post, write the blog post, get it all done, have it spiffed up a little bit in the AI, and I'm going to impress upon everybody, whatever comes out of the AI, always, always, always make sure it's correct, because they have a habit of what's referred to in the industry as hallucinating. In the real world, we call it making stuff up.
Yeah.
And they have no idea they've made it up because they just generally have no idea. But they do a fabulous job of the bits they're good at. So if you're looking at them, you're looking for examples of things to do, pick the things that the AI is good at and you're bad at, right? That
Pretty
gives you
much.
your most bang for buck.
Mm.
Other obvious examples, chatbots. We've all seen them on the websites.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Friendly Little Chatbot. How can I help you? I'm not going to go into too much detail there because I think everybody's seen them. They are kind of helpful if you're doing the things that they designed the chatbot to do. Very irritating otherwise. But as a little tip, you can always type in speak to a person, right?
Yeah.
That generally gets you further forward in the process of dumping the chatbot if it's not helping you.
That's a good tip, actually, because I think this day
Things,
and age, more and more people want to speak to people as it happens.
yeah. And talking of speaking to people, automated phone systems,
Yeah. No.
right?
Yep.
So it could be a receptionist just doing the how can I direct your call? Knowing people's names, knowing their extension numbers, and it can just direct people to the right place. Or you could use it to have a phone line support ticket system. Phone up for and ask, and then the AI asks you, what's your problem? And if it's something it knows how to solve, it can probably talk you through it there and then, right? If you think about how amazing that is from just a couple of years ago. And of course, if it can't help you, it can open a support ticket. And then somebody can come back to it in the fullness of time. But there's a fighting chance you've already had your answer in a nice conversational way.
Mm. Well, you're
So,
starting to see that in, certainly when you go to book a restaurant or, book a haircut or whatever, you go somewhere to the hairdressers, you can actually book it on, and it's AI you're talking to, and you wouldn't really know it. And then you get a confirmation email. So
and you don't care,
I know. All I want is
right?
efficiency. Yeah.
As long as my hair appointment is booked and I've got my confirmation and everything's good, it doesn't matter to me that I spoke to, AI bot or human bot,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
Because it's the goal. I
Yeah.
wanted an appointment for my hair to be done.
Mm.
Fabulous. And if I didn't have to sit on hold for 10 minutes while they dealt
Finish.
with all the people in front of me,
Yeah.
even better.
No.
Because with an AI receptionist, I'm going to refer to it,
Yeah.
I can have 40 of those, 70 of them,
Mm.
all talking at once as if you're the only person.
Well, that's a
Don't need a queue.
yeah. Well, that's an interesting, an area. How many offices have you been into where the ground floor reception desk doesn't have a receptionist anymore?
A
I have
lot.
been into a lot, so and
It's a lot.
that's been happening for a number of years. So really interesting. So just I'm going to touch on this because it is a bit of a thorny subject in terms of data protection, and people think about that the more they get into AI, are they losing their data? Is it free for all and stuff like that? Can you give us a few minutes on what the best way to deal with that or not deal with it?
Okay, then I'm going to start with the whole I'm not a lawyer, nothing here should be considered legal advice, etc., etc., etc.
Yeah.
Right? Don't have data in the first place. That's by far the best way of keeping it safe. Right? If it doesn't exist, no one can get access to it, including you.
Yeah.
Might not be massively helpful, but it is by far the best option.
Yeah.
If you're going to ignore my advice and have data, then you really have to have a think about where's it going, right?
Mm.
Who's going to have access? As in, what company, what legal jurisdiction, whatever it happens to be. Because laws are different in the UK than they are in, and I'm going to pick China because of the DeepSeek
Yeah.
bombshell from a week or two ago. And that was a big deal. People were pitching up and going, "Oh, the data goes to China." Yeah, the data goes to China. But you use ChatGPT and the data goes to America,
Mm.
right? You use a French one and the data goes to France. It's going to be that way. Unless you run the AI model locally on your own hardware, it's going to go to somebody else's physical machine, wherever that machine happens to be located. And from a practical point of view, that's going to affect your costs.
Mm.
So perhaps being a little more on topic for what you were asking, rather than drifting as I think I was, you need to know where your data's going, who's going to process it. And I think with GDPR, that's front and center on everybody's mind all the
Right.
time anyway.
Mm.
Where's my data going? Who's potentially looking at it? And just because it goes to, I'm going to say America, doesn't mean anyone looks at it, right? But they might.
I might.
And you have to therefore be very careful about what data you're sending. You know, if you're going to use a system and you pitch up and say, write me a blog post on, I don't know, cats wearing spacesuits and the geopolitical implications. I'm sure the AI will write you a perfectly good blog post. And that's fine. There's not really any personal sensitive information in that,
No.
I wouldn't think. You know, unless you happen to be instituting a top secret space program for cats, which at this point I'm not aware of anyone doing.
Correct.
So there is an awful lot of mileage you can get without worrying too much about it, because what you're doing isn't personal, doesn't contain business information, other than very vague, high level stuff.
Mm.
You know, if I was to make an AI write me a blog post, and maybe I do it on better ways to negotiate, right? There's no sensitive business information there. But if you start putting client data, if you start thinking about your own financials, then yes, I think you need to have a quick stop, go through a whole data governance process, and absolutely make sure that you have that
Yeah.
all in place, that you've thought through every single little nuance of it, because it will come back to bite you in the bottom.
Well, I think like a great example is, and in my background, and is the large scale banks. You know, they are huge repositories of data, but it is all in-house data. It's on their own systems, and they create their own AI. I know from a sales perspective, they create their own what they call smart insights. So from the data they glean from people's accounts, from audited accounts lodged with them and things of that nature, they will seek out propensity, which clients have a propensity to buy a certain product, but that's all within a ring fence of their own system. So we can all be, I think, relatively sure that the banks have got spend a lot of money in this area and to keep data safe, because the fines are astronomical if they're not. So we do we,
And that And
yeah.
that's an important thing to keep in mind. You
Yeah.
can run a lot of these AI models on your own computing hardware that you control. And of course, then that does change the data governance landscape. It changes your restrictions, and it does give you a little more
Yeah.
flexibility. But it's going to cost you more money up front because you've got to buy the computing equipment. And that's the thing that's being very attractive, I think, at the moment, is you
Yeah.
can go and use a lot of these AI systems in the dip your toe in the water kind of way for
Mm.
not very much money.
And that
And in
brings
many
us on
cases, free.
free. There's a lot of free stuff out there, and I think for businesses that are probably, they need to think about their own IP, their intellectual property. For
Mm.
those businesses with the high level of IP, they should be investing a bit more, maybe in their own systems. Maybe they will hopefully already do it, but if data and their IP, and the data might be their IP, um, it's very key for them to protect that. So we talked around the cost because there's free to have sort of stuff out there, but obviously our listeners will be asking about cost. It's a any can you give any idea around the levels of cost for let's say a medium-sized business, which many of our listeners will be, that want to get into that sort of area?
I think it's relatively straightforward. As soon as you can tell me how long this piece of string is.
Well, I'll come back to you one day on that.
And that is the problem. It
Yeah,
depends very much on what you want to do with it. So if you want to have just write a couple of blog posts, you could probably do that for nothing or for a few tens of pounds a month.
yeah,
If you now want to run a chat bot on your website, if no one comes to the website, it's quite cheap. But if you get thousands of people a day coming and interacting with your chatbot, then it's going to become very expensive very quickly. Now, I say very expensive compared to not having the chatbot. But if the chatbot is now saving you having to employ, and this will sound horrible, but employ extra staff or outsource to a data center or a call center somewhere else, then actually that thousands of pounds you're spending a month might actually be a bargain,
yeah.
right?
So it's all about productivity in a way. So how do you as Davana ensure value for money for your clients? Can you give us a few minutes of your process of how you go through and assess?
First of all, it's a tool, as we've talked about before.
Yeah,
If this is the right tool for the job, then it's worth pursuing how to use it. If it's not, then we're done already,
yeah,
right? Because it's not the right tool. And if it's not the right tool, why carry on? So that's broadly how we start. What is it you're trying to do? What problem are we solving? And is this the right tool? That's actually how we always start. Because until you understand your problem, you can't create a solution. And I know it sounds boring and it sounds like I'm evading the question, which of course, obviously, I'm going to do because it's in my nature.
well, whenever we talk many situations, look, we're not going to have had a hit on a number because it's it all depends is the answer. Yeah, depends on the size of the business, what you want, where you want to go to. But I think it's key for clients when they're entering into this is that they get some sort of they obviously want value for money and they want good service.
And so we then look at the business case.
Yeah.
What's the business case for using this tool? And, we talked a little bit a moment ago about cost. If you're running the models and the systems internally, then your cost is going to be fairly fixed and predictable
Mm.
because you've already bought the computing infrastructure to run it. And now this will sound bad, but now you're only paying for the electricity and space in your building to hold it, etc. So your capital expenditure has taken care of the vast majority of the cost. And now your ongoing costs, well, they're relatively small.
Mm.
If you're using somebody else's, then obviously the exact opposite is true.
Yeah.
You're paying very little for the capital expenditure because you didn't buy anything, so that's zero. But your ongoing costs, well, they're going to be dependent on usage. And I think that's really important. It's dependent on usage. And it's not just how many times somebody uses I'm just going to pick chatbot,
Yeah.
right? It also depends how long the conversation is, because the models typically are charged per, and it's called a token. So you pay per token. Actually, you pay per 100,000 or a million tokens, right?
Yeah.
Because the numbers are so small otherwise. But a token is a short word, like 4 or 5 characters. So a long word might be 2 tokens. So you're paying per token. And obviously, the longer the conversation, the more tokens.
Not taken used.
And therefore the cost goes up. So lots of short conversations would actually be cheaper than a few very long conversations.
Okay, that's interesting. So,
So
but
we're
even that
back. See, we're back to my how long is a piece of string?
but surely I think a lot of our listeners in business would like to pay as you go a little bit, yeah, rather
Mm.
than shelling out thousands of pounds for a system that isn't adopted or used. So actually, it's much better that the approach to this is to scope out the problem, as we could call it, then find the solution, and then a pay as you go option is probably, to me, I always prefer pay as you go because I'm not shelling out a load of money up front. So,
And
yeah,
that is a good approach. That's a good approach, Ian. You find out your problem, you have a look at your solutions, you look at your business case, and then when it comes to prototyping,
mm,
because like anything tech-wise, step one, prototype it. Because the first version will only be,
yeah,
because you don't know the mistakes you are going to make until you've made them. And when you're doing stuff with data, it always there's mistakes because you've made assumptions that were incorrect. The business thought that X would happen by not mentioning it in the requirements,
yeah,
and it doesn't. So the prototype you can often create using, I will call it publicly available systems. So using an API at one of the AI provider companies.
yeah,
And then you have to decide later on, is our data suitable for sharing with those companies, or do we have to bring the processing in-house? But after the prototyping phase, you already know if this is going to work, if people are going to use it, or if it's going to be a waste of money. And so at that point, that's kind of the point of the prototype.
yeah,
We've got something that's good enough. It basically works. Who wants it? And I'm going to tell you now, virtually everybody wants it because as soon
everybody,
as there's a new tool that makes their job easier, makes them more productive,
yeah,
everybody wants it.
yeah. Right, we're sort of drawing to a close, Catherine. So I'm going to ask you the $6 million, dollar question is, where is it all going in the future? Do we have any idea? Do we have any, bright sparks out there who are telling us what it's going to look like in a few years' time?
I think that's relatively straightforward. You only have to look back at the last 18 months. The models have become more sophisticated.
Hmm,
The pricing has dropped for the more sophisticated models, so you're getting more for less money. The AIs are now compared to then, so extrapolating to the future, they're able to do
hmm,
more tasks. Go back a year, the AI models were all, let's generate a picture of a cat in a spacesuit or an astronaut riding a horse or something wacky. Now it's much more reasoning models. How do you do X? And the AI will sit there and I'm going to use the phrase ponder because if you've seen one doing its output, that's exactly what it does. It asks itself questions, provides answers, speculates about what was intended. What did the user really mean when they asked this? Did they mean X or did they mean Y? And so that's already started. So I would expect that to get A, cheaper and more sophisticated. The more sophisticated, the more useful, right?
yeah, it just
And
seems.
I would expect to see uses that we aren't thinking about at the moment. We're thinking data processing, we're thinking creation, etc., etc. But what happens when we start using them for decision making? Right? That's probably the next step. Once you have enough I'm going to say enough reasoning capability, enough data, then you can start making decisions.
Yeah,
And I do wonder where that's going to hit first. My guess will probably be middle management.
yeah, it seems to be. obviously within any organization, it works from the bottom. Any new development works from the bottom and works its way through the ranks and upwards, you know. And it just scares me, the thought of a driverless car driving around making a decision if a pedestrian walks out in front of it. So, but I think that's there already. It's just not being allowed to be used. So yeah, fascinating
And
stuff.
on your topic of uses of the future,
Mm.
almost certainly this will get put into military tech,
Oh, 100%. I think
right?
it's probably being used now and we don't know it.
So I'm going to say, if we're coming towards the end,
Yeah.
I'm going to say, dip your toe in the water, get a feel for it. And I do mean this in the strictest sense of the word, play with it.
Mm.
Try it, see what it does, see what it doesn't do. Get familiar with how stuff works, even if it's just, I'm going to call it recreationally. So you're not trying to use it in a business context, you're just having some, I'm going to say, fun.
Mm.
Don't try and use it for things that it's obviously not meant for. So if you've got a large language model, an LLM, its job is to write paragraphs, text. If you start trying to probe it for facts, it's the wrong tool for the job,
Yeah.
right? It might get it, it might just hallucinate and make something up. Use it for its strengths, just the same as you would any other tool. You don't try putting screws in with a hammer. And if you do try putting nails in with a screwdriver, that's very tiring and very inefficient.
Yeah.
So use them for the things that they're good at. If it's for writing text, write text. It's not for answering questions, it's for writing text. Use it for research, get a feel for things, right? Find its limits. Find your limits using it as well, because you will have limits. We all do. There are some things that you might find it suitable for, other things you don't. So use it for what it's good for, what you find it suitable for, and not other things. And if you do it today and you go, yeah, it's not for me, come back in a month's time, come back in 3 months, try it again, because it might be for you, because it will be different. The models will improve, the costs will reduce, but most importantly, always, 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 please check the output, because the last thing you want to do is just blindly take what it said because it might be complete gibberish.
And it will
Or
destroy your
worse,
business if you let it
very
out.
good, or very, very good with a teeny mistake in it,
Yeah,
right? And that can make you look like a banana, and you don't want to be doing that. And
absolutely.
just remember, when somebody's hyping something, they're trying to sell you something. So don't believe the hype. The machines can do what the machines do today, not what they might do in some nebulous distant future, right? Don't buy the dream, buy the function. I think
That's great advice.
think that's probably what I'd
That's,
like to say
yeah,
on
I
the
think,
future.
and that is a good way to bring this to a close. And thank you, Catherine. I've really enjoyed that conversation, and I'm sure our listeners did as well. And thank you to our listeners for joining us for this episode. And we will be producing further podcasts in the future that seek to support your business with information and guidance where we can. So thank you all, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.